Let me know when to start, okay?
Mataji, we are live. You can start.
Okay. Hare Krishna. I would like to welcome everyone to this reading session of Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, on the occasion of appearance of Sri Nrsimhadeva coming in 2 days. So we'll start the reading after the Mangalacharan. Let me do it. Om Jnanatimirandhasya Jnananjana-shalakaya Chakshurunmilitam Yena Tasmai Shri Gurave Namaha Shri Chaitanya Manovistam Sthapitam Yena Bhutale Swayam Rupa Kadamahyam Dadati Swapadantikam Vandeham Shri Guru Shri YutapadaKamalam Shri Gurum Vaishnavamscha Shri Rupam Sagrajatam Sahagana Raghunathanvitam Tam Sajivam Sadvaitam Sabadhutam Parijana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sahagana Lalita Shri Visakhanvitamscha Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Presthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nirbishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshatarine हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगतपते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्येव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौरभक्तवृंद हरे कृष्णा कृष्ण कृष्णा हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे नारायणं नमस्कृत्य नरं चैव नरोत्तमं देवी सरस्वती व्यासं ततो जयमुदीरयेत् ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय ॐ नमो भगवते वासुदेवाय Srimad Bhagavatam Canto 7 Chapter 5 Text 53. Is that correct? Okay. Translation.
That's correct, Mataji. That's right. Yes.
Okay. It's the chapter's name is Prahlad, the saintly son of Hiranyakashipu. Text 53. Translation. The teachers Sanda and Amarka instructed Prahlad Maharaj in the three kinds of material advancement called religion, economic development, and sense gratification. Prahlad, however, being situated above such instructions, did not like them. For such instructions are based on the duality of worldly affairs, which involve one in a materialistic way of life marked by birth, death, old age, and disease. Purport. The entire world is interested in the materialistic way of life. Indeed, practically 99.9% of the people in the three worlds are uninterested in liberation or spiritual education. Only the devotees of the Lord, headed by such great personalities as Prahlad Maharaj and Narad Muni, are interested in the real education of spiritual life. One cannot understand the principles of religion while staying on the material platform. Therefore, one must follow these great personalities. As stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 6.3.20, Swayambhur Narada Sambhu Kumara Kapilo Manuho Prahlado Janako Vishmo Balirvaya Sakirvayam. One must follow in the footsteps of such great personalities as Lord Brahma, Narad, Lord Shiva, Kapila, Manu, the Kumaras, Prahlad Maharaj, Bhishma, Janak, Bali Maharaj, Sukadev Goswami, and Yamaraj. Those interested in spiritual life should follow Prahlad Maharaj in rejecting the education of religion, economic development, and sense gratification. One should be interested in spiritual education. Therefore, the Krishna consciousness movement is spreading all over the world. Followed in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj, who did not like any of the materialistic education he received from his teachers. Text 54. Translation. When the teachers went home to attend to their household affairs, the students of the same age as Prahlad Maharaj would call him to take the opportunity of leisure hours of play. Purport. In tiffin hours, the hours when the teachers were absent from the classroom, the students called Prahlad Maharaj, wanting to play with him. As will be seen from the following verses, however, Prahlad Maharaj was not very much interested in playing. Instead, he wanted to utilize every moment of advancing in Krishna consciousness. Therefore, as indicated in this verse by the word Kritakshanihi, at the opportune moment when it was possible to preach about Krishna consciousness, Prahlad Maharaj used the time as follows. Text 55, translation. Prahlad Maharaj, who was truly the supreme learned person, then addressed his class friends in very sweet language. Smiling, he began to teach them about the uselessness of the materialistic way of life. Being very kind to them, he instructed them as follows. Purport. Prahlad Maharaj's smile is very significant. The other students were very much advanced in enjoying materialistic life through religion, economic development, and sense gratification. But Prahlad Maharaj laughed at them, knowing that this was not actual happiness. For real happiness is advancement in Krishna consciousness. The duty of those who follow in the footsteps of Prahlad Maharaj is to teach the entire world how to be Krishna conscious and thus be really happy. Materialistic persons take to so-called religion to get some blessings so that they can improve their economic position and enjoy the material world through sense gratification. But devotees like Prahlad Maharaj laugh at how foolish they are to be busy in temporary life without knowledge of soul's transmigration from one body to another. Materialistic persons are engaged in striving for temporary benefits, whereas persons advanced in spiritual knowledge, such as Prahlad Maharaj, are not interested in the materialistic way of life. Instead, they want to be elevated to an eternal life of knowledge and bliss. Therefore, as Krishna is always compassionate to the fallen souls, his servants, the devotees of Lord Krishna, are also interested in educating the entire populace in Krishna consciousness. The mistake of materialistic life is understood by devotees, and therefore they smile upon it, considering it insignificant. Out of compassion, however, such devotees preach the gospel of Bhagavad Gita all over the world. Text 56, 57. My dear King Yudhishthir, all the children were very much affectionate and respectful to Prahlad Maharaj, and because of their tender age, they were not so polluted by the instructions and actions of their teachers, who were attached to condemn duality and bodily comfort. Thus the boys surrounded Prahlad Maharaj, giving up their playthings and sat down to hear him. Their hearts and eyes being fixed upon him, they looked at him with great earnestness. Prahlad Maharaj, although born in a demon family, was an exalted devotee, and he desired their welfare. Thus, he began instructing them about the futility of materialistic life. Purport. The words Bala Adushita Dhiyaha indicate that the children, being of a tender age, were not as polluted by materialistic life as their fathers. Prahlad Maharaj, therefore, taking advantage of the innocence of his class friends, began teaching them about the importance of spiritual life and the insignificance of materialistic life. Although the teachers Shanda and Amarka were instructing all the boys in the materialistic life of religion, economic development, and sense gratification, the boys were not much polluted. Therefore, with great attention, they wanted to hear from Prahlad Maharaj about Krishna consciousness. In our Krishna consciousness movement, the Gurukula plays an extremely important part in our activities because right from childhood, the boys at the Gurukul are instructed about Krishna consciousness. Thus, they become steady within the course of their hearts, and there is very little possibility that they will be conquered by the modes of material nature when they are older. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 7th canto, 5th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Prahlad Maharaj, the saintly son of Hiranyakashipu. Chapter 6. Prahlad instructs his demoniac schoolmates. Text 1. Prahlad Maharaj said, one who is sufficiently intelligent should use the human form of body from the very beginning of life. In other words, from the tender age of childhood. to practice the activities of devotional service, giving up all other engagements. The human body is most rarely achieved, and although temporary like other bodies, it is meaningful because in human life one can perform devotional service. Even a slight amount of sincere devotional service can give one complete perfection. Purport. The whole purpose of Vedic civilization and of reading the Vedas is to attain the perfect stage of devotional service in the human form of life. According to the Vedic system, therefore, from the very beginning of life, the Brahmacharya system is introduced so that from one's very childhood, from the age of 5 years, one can practice modifying one's human activities so as to engage perfectly in devotional service. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 2.40, Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. Even a little advancement on this path can protect one from the most dangerous type of fear. Modern civilization, not referring to the verdicts of Vedic literature, is so cruel to the members of human society that instead of teaching children to become brahmacharis, it teaches mothers to kill their children even in the womb, on the plea of curbing the increase of population. And if by chance a child is saved, he is educated only for sense gratification. Gradually, throughout the entire world, human society is losing interest in the perfection of life. Indeed, men are living like cats and dogs, spoiling the duration of their human lives by actually preparing to transmigrate again to the degraded species among 8,400,000 forms of life. The Krishna consciousness movement is anxious to serve human society by teaching people to perform devotional service, which can save a human being from being degraded again to animal life. As already stated in by Prahlad Maharaj, Bhagavad Dharma consists of Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, Padasevanam, Archanam, Vandanam, Dasyam, Sakhyam, Atma, Nivedanam. In all the schools, colleges, and universities, and at home, all children and youths should be taught to hear about the Supreme Personality of Godhead. In other words, they should be taught to hear the instructions of Bhagavad Gita, to put them into practice in their lives, and thus to become strong in devotional service, free from fear of being degraded to animal life. Following Bhagavad Dharma has been made extremely easy in this age of Kali. The Shastra says, Hare Nama, Hare Nama, Hare Nama eva kevalam, Kalo nasti eva, nasti eva, nasti eva gatiranyatha. One need only chant the Hare Krishna Mahamantra. Everyone engaged in the practice of chanting the Hare Krishna Mahamantra will be completely cleansed from the core of his heart and be saved from the cycle of birth and death. Text 2. The human form of life affords one a chance to return home back to Godhead. Therefore, every living entity, especially in the human form of life, must engage in devotional service to the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu. This devotional service is natural because Lord Vishnu, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the most beloved, the master of the soul, and the well wisher of all other living beings. Purport. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 5.29, Bhaktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhrudam sarvabhutanam gyantva mam shantim richati. The sage who knows me as the ultimate purpose of all sacrifices and austerities, the supreme lord of all planets and demigods, and the benefactor and well-wisher of all living entities, attains peace from the pangs of material miseries. Simply by understanding these three facts, that the Supreme Lord Vishnu is the proprietor of the entire creation, that he is the best well wishing friend of all living entities, and that he is the supreme enjoyer of everything, one becomes peaceful and happy. For this transcendental happiness, the living entities wander throughout the universe in different forms of life and different planetary systems. But because he has forgotten his intimate relationship with Vishnu, he has merely suffered life after life. Therefore, the educational system in the human form of life should be so perfect that one will understand his intimate relationship with God or Vishnu. Every living entity has an intimate relationship with God. One should therefore glorify the Lord in the adoration of Santaras, or revive his eternal relationship with Vishnu as a servant in Dasyaras, a friend in Sakhyaras, a parent in Vaschalaras, or a conjugal lover in Madhuryaras. All these relationships are on the platform of love. Vishnu is the center of love for everyone, and therefore the duty of everyone is to engage in the loving service of the Lord. As stated by the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Bhagavatam 3.25-38, Yesham aham priya atma sutascha sakha guru surhuda devam ishtam. In any form of life, we are related with Vishnu, who is the most beloved, the super soul, son, friend, and guru. Our eternal relationship with God can be revived in the human form of life, and that should be the goal of education. Indeed, that is the perfection of life and the perfection of education. Text 3. Prahlad Maharaj continued, My dear friends, born of demoniac families, the happiness perceived with reference to the sense objects by contact with the body can be obtained in any form of life. According to one's past fruitive activities, such happiness is automatically obtained without endeavor, just as we obtain distress. Purport. In the material world, in any form of life, there is some so called happiness and so called distress. No one invites distress in order to suffer, but still it comes. Similarly, even if we do not endeavor to obtain the advantages of material happiness, we shall obtain them automatically. This happiness and distress are obtainable in any form of life without endeavor. Thus, there is no need to waste time and energy fighting against distress or working very hard for happiness. Our only business in the human form of life should be to revive our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead and thus become qualified to return home back to Godhead. Material happiness and distress come as soon as we accept the material body, regardless of what form. We cannot avoid such happiness and distress under any circumstances. The best use of human life, therefore, lies in reviving our relationship with the Supreme Lord Vishnu. Text 4. Endeavors merely for sense gratification or material happiness through economic development are not to be performed, for they result only in a loss of time and energy, with no actual profit. If one's endeavors are directed towards Krishna consciousness, one can surely attain the spiritual platform of self realization. There is no such benefit from engaging oneself in economic development. Purport. We see materialistic persons busily engaged in economic development all day and all night, trying to increase their material opulence. But even if we suppose that they get some benefit from such endeavors, that does not solve the real problem of their lives, nor do they know what the real problem of life is. This is due to a lack of spiritual education. Especially in the present age, every man is in darkness, in the bodily conception of life, not knowing anything of the spirit soul and its needs. Misguided by the blind leaders of society, people consider the body to be everything, and they are engaged in trying to keep the body materially comfortable. Such a civilization is condemned because it does not lead humanity toward knowing the real goal of life. People are simply wasting time and the valuable gift of the human form, because a human being who does not cultivate spiritual life but dies like the cats and dogs is degraded in his next life. From human life, such a person is put into the cycle of continuous birth and death. Thus, one loses the true benefit of human life, which is to become Krishna conscious and solve life's problems. Text 5. Therefore, while in the material existence, bhavam ashritaha, a person fully competent to distinguish wrong from right must endeavor to achieve the highest goal of life as long as the body is stout and strong and is not embarrassed by dwindling. Purport. As stated by Prahlad Maharaj at the beginning of this chapter, Kaumara Acharet Pragya. The word Pragya refers to one who is experienced and who can distinguish right from wrong. Such a person should not waste his energy and valuable human lifetime simply working like a cat or a dog to develop his economic condition. For one word in this verse, there are two readings, Bhavam Ashritaha and Bhayam Ashritaha. But accepting the meaning of either of them will bring one to the same conclusion. Bhayam Asritaha indicates that the materialistic way of life is always fearful because at every step there is danger. Materialistic life is full of anxieties and fear, Bhayam. Similarly, accepting the reading Bhavam Asritaha, the word Bhavan refers to unnecessary trouble and problems. For want of Krishna consciousness, one is put into Bhavam, being perpetually embraced by birth, death, old age, and disease. Thus, one is surely full of anxieties. Human society should be divided into social system of Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, and Sudras, but everyone can engage in devotional service. If one wants to live without devotional service, his status as a Brahman, Kshatriya, Vaishya, or Sudra certainly has no meaning. It is said, Sthanat Bhrashtaha Patanti Adhaha. Whether one is in a higher or lower division, one certainly falls down for want of Krishna consciousness. A sane man, therefore, is always fearful of falling from his position. This is a regulative principle. One should not fall from his exalted position. The highest goal of life can be achieved as long as one's body is stout and strong. We should therefore live in such a way that we keep ourselves always healthy and strong in mind and intelligence so that we can distinguish the goal of life from a life full of problems. A thoughtful man must act in this way, learning to distinguish right from wrong, and thus attain the goal of life. Text 6. Every human being has a maximum duration of life of 100 years. But for one who cannot control his senses, half of those years are completely lost because at night he sleeps 12 hours, being covered by ignorance. Therefore, such a person has a lifetime of only 50 years. Purport. Lord Brahma, a human being, and an ant all live for 100 years, but their lifetimes of 100 years are different from one another. This world is a relative world, and its relative moments of time are different. Thus, the 100 years of Brahma are not the same as the 100 years of a human being. From Bhagavad Gita, we understand that Brahma's daytime of 12 hours equals 4,300,000 times 1000 years. Sahasra Yuga Paryantam Aharyat Brahmano Viduhu. Thus, the Varsha Satam or 100 years are relatively different according to time, person, and circumstances. As far as human beings are concerned, the calculation given here is right for the general public. Although one has a maximum of 100 years of life, by sleeping one loses 50 years. Eating, sleeping, sex life, and fear are the four bodily necessities, but to utilize the full duration of life, a person desiring to advance in spiritual consciousness must reduce these activities. That will give him an opportunity to fully use his lifetime. Text 7. In the tender age of childhood, when everyone is bewildered, one passes 10 years. Similarly, in boyhood, engaged in sporting and playing, one passes another 10 years. In this way, 20 years are wasted. Similarly, in old age, when one is an invalid, unable to perform even material activities, one passes another 20 years wastefully. Purport. Without Krishna consciousness, one wastes 20 years in childhood and boyhood and another 20 years in old age, when one cannot perform any material activities and is full of anxiety about what is to be done by his sons and grandsons and how one's estate should be protected. Half of these years are spent in sleep. Furthermore, one wastes another 30 years sleeping at night during the rest of his life. The 70 out of 100 years are wasted by a person who does not know the aim of life and how to utilize this human form. Text 8. One whose mind and senses are uncontrolled becomes increasingly attached to family life because of insatiable lusty desires and very strong illusion. In such a madman's life, the remaining years are also wasted because even during those years he cannot engage himself in devotional service. Purport. This is the account of 100 years of life. Although in this age a lifetime of 100 years is generally not possible, even if one has 100 years, the calculation is that 50 years are wasted in sleeping, 20 years in childhood and boyhood, and 20 years in invalidity, jara vyadhi. This leaves only a few more years, but because of too much attachment to household life, those years are also spent with no purpose, without God consciousness. Therefore, one should be trained to be a perfect brahmachari in the beginning of life, and then to be perfect in sense control, following the regulative principles if one becomes a householder. From householder life, one is ordered to accept Banaprastha life and go to the forest and then accept sannyas. That is the perfection of life. From the very beginning of life, those who are ajitendriya, who cannot control their senses, are educated only for sense gratification, as we have seen in the Western countries. Thus, the entire duration of life of even 100 years is wasted and misused, and at the time of death, one transmigrates to another body which may not be human. At the end of 100 years, one who has not acted as a human being in a life of tapasya, austerity, and penance must certainly be embodied again in a body like those of cats, dogs, and hogs. Therefore, this life of lusty desires and sense gratification is extremely risky. Text 9. What person too attached to household life due to being unable to control his senses can liberate himself? An attached householder is bound very strongly by ropes of affection for his family, wife, children, and other relatives. Purport. Prahlad Maharaj's first proposal was Kaumara Acharet Pragyo, Dharman Bhagavatan Iha. One who is sufficiently intelligent should use the human form of body from the very beginning of life. In other words, from the tender age of childhood to practice the activities of devotional service, giving up all other engagements. Dharman Bhagavatan means the religious principle of reviving our relationship with the Supreme Personality of Godhead. For this purpose, Krishna personally advises Sarva Dharman Parityajya Mamekam Sharanam Braja. Give up all other duties and surrender unto me. While in the material world we manufacture so many duties in the name of so many isms, but our actual duty is to free ourselves from the cycle of birth, death, old age, and disease. For this purpose, one must first be liberated from material bondage, and especially from household life. Household life is actually a kind of license for materially attached person by which to enjoy sense gratification under regulative principles. Otherwise, there is no need of entering household life. Before entering household life, one should be trained as brahmachari, living under the care of the guru, whose place is known as the Gurukul. Brahmachari Gurukule Vasan Danta Gurur Hitam. Bhagavatam 7.12.1. From the very beginning, a brahmachari is trained to sacrifice everything for the benefit of the guru. A brahmachari is advised to go begging alms door to door, addressing all women as mother, and whatever he collects goes to the benefit of the guru. In this way, he learns how to control his senses and sacrifice everything for the guru. When he is fully trained, if he likes, he is allowed to marry. Thus, he is not an ordinary grihastha who has learned only how to satisfy his senses. A trained grihastha can gradually give up household life and go to the forest to become increasingly enlightened in the spiritual life and at last take sannyas. Prahlad Maharaj explained to his father that to be freed from all mental anxieties, one should go to the forest. Hitvatma patam gruham andhakupam. One should give up his household, which is a place for going further and further down into the darkest regions of material existence. The first advice, therefore, is that one must give up household life, gruham andhakupam. However, if one prefers to remain in the dark well of household life because of uncontrolled senses, he becomes increasingly entangled by ropes of affection for his wife, children, servants, house, money, and so on. Such a person cannot attain liberation from material bondage. Therefore, children should be taught from the very beginning of life to be first class brahmacharis. Then it will be possible for them to give up the household life in the future. To return home back to Godhead, one must be completely free from material attachment. Therefore, Bhakti Yoga means Vairagya Vidya, the art that can help one develop a distaste for material enjoyment. वासुदेवे भगवती भक्तियोगः प्रयोजितः जनयति आसु वैराग्यं ज्ञानं च यद् अहेतुकम्. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Bhagavatam 1.2.7. If one engages in devotional service from the beginning of life, he easily attains Vairagya Vidya or Asakti, detachment, and becomes Jitendriya, the controller of his senses. One who perfectly engages in devotional service is therefore called Goswami or Swami, master of the senses. Unless one is master of the senses, he should not accept the renounced order of life, sannyas. A strong inclination for sense enjoyment is the cause of the material body. Without full knowledge, one cannot be unattached to material enjoyment. But as long as one is not in that position, one is not fit to return home back to Godhead. Text 10. Money is so dear that one conceives of money as being sweeter than honey. Therefore, who can give up the desire to accumulate money, especially in household life? Thieves, professional servants, soldiers, and merchants try to acquire money even by risking their very dear lives. Purport. How money can be dearer than life is indicated in this verse. Thieves may enter the house of a rich man to steal money at the risk of their lives. Because of trespassing, they may be killed by guns or attacked by watchdogs, but still they try to commit burglary. Why do they risk their lives? Only to get some money. Similarly, a professional soldier is recruited into the army and he accepts such service when the risk of dying on the battlefield only for the sake of money. With the risk of dying on the battlefield only for the sake of money. In the same way, merchants go from one country to another on boats at risk of their lives, or they dive into water of the sea to collect pearls and valuable gems. Thus it is practically proved, and everyone will admit that money is sweeter than honey. One may risk everything to acquire money, and this is especially true of rich men who are too attached to household life. Formerly, of course, the members of the higher caste, the Brahmanas, Kshatriyas, and Vaishyas, everyone but Shudras, were trained in the Gurukul to adhere to a life of renunciation and self control by practicing brahmacharya and mystic yoga. Then they are allowed to enter household life. There have consequently been many instances in which great kings and emperors have been given up household life. Although they were extremely opulent and were the masters of kingdoms, they could give up all their possessions because they were trained early as brahmacharis. Prahlad Maharaj's advice is therefore very appropriate. Komara acharet pragyo dharman bhagavataniha dullabham manusham janma tadapi adrubham arthadam. One who is sufficiently intelligent should use the human form of body from the very beginning of life. In other words, from the tender age of childhood, to practice the activities of devotional service, giving up all other engagements. The human body is most rarely achieved, and although temporary like all other bodies, it is meaningful because in human life one can perform devotional service. Even a slight amount of sincere devotional service can give one complete perfection. Human society should take advantage of this instruction. Text 11 to 13. How can a person who is most affectionate to his family, the core of his heart being always filled with their pictures, give up their association? Specifically, a wife is always very kind and sympathetic and always pleases her husband in a solitary place. Who could give up the association of such a dear and affectionate wife? Small children talk in broken language, very pleasing to hear, and their affectionate father always thinks of their sweet words. How could he give up their association? One's elderly parents and one's sons and daughters are also very dear. A daughter is especially dear to her father, and while living at her husband's house, she is always in his mind. Who could give up that association? Aside from this, in household affairs, there are many decorated items of household furniture, and there are also animals and servants. Who could give up such comforts? The attached householder is like a silkworm, which weaves a cocoon in which it becomes imprisoned, unable to get out. Simply for the satisfaction of two important senses, the genitals and the tongue, one is bound by material conditions. How can one escape? Purport. In household affairs, the first attraction is the beauty and pleasing wife, who increases household attraction more and more. One enjoys his wife with two prominent sense organs, namely the tongue and the genitals. The wife speaks very sweetly. This is certainly an attraction. Then she prepares very palatable foods to satisfy the tongue. And when the tongue is satisfied, one gains strength in the other sense organs, especially the genitals. Thus, the wife gives pleasure in sexual intercourse. Household life means sex life. Yan maithunadi gruhamedi sukham hi tucham. This is encouraged by the tongue. Then there are children. A baby gives pleasure by speaking sweet words in broken language. And when the sons and daughters are grown up, one becomes involved in their education and marriage. Then there are one's own father and mother to be taken care of, and one also becomes concerned with the social atmosphere and with pleasing his brothers and sisters. A man becomes increasingly entangled in household affairs so much so that leaving them becomes almost impossible. Thus, the household becomes gruham andhakupam, a dark well into which the man has fallen. For such a man to get out is extremely difficult unless he is helped by a strong person, the spiritual master, who helps the fallen person with a strong rope of spiritual instructions. A fallen person should take advantage of this rope, and then the spiritual master or the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, will take him out of the dark well. Text 14. One who is too attached cannot understand that he is wasting his valuable time for the maintenance of his family. He also fails to understand that the purpose of human life, a life suitable for realization of the absolute truth, is being imperceptibly spoiled. However, he is very cleverly attentive to seeing that not a single farthing is lost by mismanagement. Thus, although an attached person in material existence always suffers from threefold miseries, he does not develop a distaste for the way of material existence. Purport. A foolish man does not understand the values of human life, nor does he understand how he is wasting his valuable life simply for the maintenance of his family members. He is expert in calculating the loss of pounds, shillings, and pence. But he is so foolish that he does not know how much money he is losing, even according to material considerations. Chanakya Pandit gives the example that a moment of life cannot be purchased in exchange of millions of dollars. A foolish person, however, wastes such a valuable life without knowing how much he is losing, even according to monetary calculations. Although a materialistic person is expert in calculating cost and doing business, he does not realize that he is misusing his costly life for want of knowledge. Even though such a materialistic person is always suffering threefold miseries, he is not intelligent enough to seize his materialistic way of life. Text 15. If a person too attached to the duties of family maintenance is unable to control his senses, the core of his heart is immersed in how to accumulate money. Although he knows that one who takes the wealth of others will be punished by the law of the government and by the laws of Yamraj after death, he continues cheating others to acquire money. Purport. Especially in these days, people do not believe in the next life or in the court of Yamraj and the previous punishments of the sinful. But at least one should know that one who cheats others to acquire money will be punished by the laws of government. Nonetheless, people do not care about the laws of this life or those governing the next. Despite whatever knowledge one has, one cannot stop his sinful activities if he is unable to control his senses. Text 16. O my friends, sons of demons, in this material world, even those who are apparently advanced in education have the propensity to consider this is mine and that is for others. Thus, they are always engaged in providing the necessities of life to their families in a limited conception of family life, just like uneducated cats and dogs. They are unable to take spiritual knowledge, instead, they are bewildered and overcome by ignorance. Purport. In human society, there are attempts to educate the human being, but for animal society, there is no such system, nor are animals able to be educated. Therefore, animals and unintelligent men are called bimudha or ignorant, bewildered, whereas an educated person is called vidwan. The real vidwan is one who tries to understand his own position within this material world. For example, when Sanatan Goswami submitted to the lotus feet of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, he His first question was, Ke ami kene amaya jare tapatraya. In other words, he wanted to know his constitutional position and why he was suffering from the threefold miseries of material existence. This is the process of education. If one does not ask, Who am I? What is the goal of my life? But instead follows the same animal propensities as cats and dogs, what is the use of this education? As discussed in the previous verse, a living being is entrapped by his fruitive activities exactly like a silkworm trapped in its own cocoon. Foolish persons are generally encased by their fruitive actions, karma, because of a strong desire to enjoy this material world. Such attracted persons become involved in society, community, and nation, and waste their time not having profited from having obtained human forms. Especially in this age, Kali Yuga, great leaders, politicians, philosophers, and scientists are all engaged in foolish activities, thinking, This is mine and this is yours. The scientists invent nuclear weapons and collaborate with the big leaders to protect the interests of their own nation or society. In this verse, however, it is clearly stated that despite their so called advanced knowledge, they actually have the same mentality as cats and dogs. As cats, dogs, and other animals, not knowing their true interest in life, become increasingly involved in ignorance, the so called educated person who does not know his own self interest or the true goal of life becomes increasingly involved in materialism. Therefore, Prahlad Maharaj advises everyone to follow the principles of Banashram Dharma. Specifically, at a certain point, one must give up family life and take to the renounced order of life to cultivate spiritual knowledge and thus become liberated. This is further discussed in the following verses. Text 17-18. My dear friends, O sons of the demons, it is certain that no one bereft of knowledge of the Supreme Personality of Godhead has been able to liberate himself from material bondage at any time or in any country. Rather, those bereft of knowledge of the Lord are bound by the material laws. They are factually addicted to sense gratification, and their target is women. Indeed, they are actually playthings in the hands of attractive women. Victimized by such a conception of life, they become surrounded by children, grandchildren, and great grandchildren, and thus they are shackled to material bondage. Those who are very much addicted to this conception of life are called demons. Therefore, although you are sons of demons, keep aloof from such persons and take shelter of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Narayan, the origin of all the demigods, because the ultimate goal for the devotees of Narayan is liberation from the bondage of material existence. Purport. Prahlad Maharaj has maintained the philosophical point of view that one should give up the dark veil of family life and go to the forest to take shelter of the lotus feet of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Hitvatma patam gruham antakupam vanam yat gato yad dharim ashrayata. In this verse also, he stresses the same point. In the history of human society, no one at any time or any place has been liberated because of too much affection and attachment for his family. Even in those who are apparently very educated, the same family attachment is there. They cannot give up the association of their families, even in the old age or invalidity, for they are attached to sense enjoyment. As we have several times discussed, yan maithunadi gruhamedi sukhami tucham. So-called householders are simply attracted by sexual enjoyment. Thus, they keep themselves shackled in family life, and furthermore, they want their children to be shackled in the same way. Playing the part of playboys and in the hands of women, they glide down to the darkest regions of material existence. Adanta Govir Vishatam Tamisram Punaha Punascharbita Charvananam. Because they are unable to control their senses, they continue a life of chewing the chewed and therefore descend to the darkest material regions. One should give up the association of such demons and adhere to the association of devotees. Thus, one will be able to be liberated from material bondage. Text 19. My dear sons of demons, the Supreme Personality of Godhead Narayan is the original Supersoul, the father of all living entities. Consequently, there are no impediments to pleasing him or worshipping him under any conditions, whether one be a child or an old man. The relationship between the living entities and the Supreme Personality of Godhead is always a fact. and therefore there is no difficulty in pleasing the Lord. Purport. One may ask, one is certainly very attached to family life, but if one gives up family life to be attached to the service of the Lord, one must undergo the same endeavor and trouble. Therefore, what is the benefit of taking the trouble to engage in the service of the Lord? This is not a valid objection. The Lord asserts in Bhagavad Gita 14.4, Sarva yonishu kanteya murtaya sambhavatiya tasam brahma mahadyonir aham bija pradapita. It should be understood that all species of life, O son of Kunti, are made possible by birth in this material nature, and that I am the seed giving father, the Supreme Lord Narayan, is I'm the seed giving father. The Supreme Lord Narayan is the seed giving father of all living entities because the living entities are parts and parcels of the Supreme Lord. Mame Vamso Jiva Bhuta. As there is no difficulty in establishing the intimate relationship between a father and son, there is no difficulty in re establishing the natural intimate relationship between Narayan and the living entities. Swalpam apyasya dharmasya trayate mahato bhayat. If one performs even very slight devotional service, Narayan is always ready to save one from the greatest danger. The definite example is Ajamil. Ajamil separated himself from the Supreme Personality of Godhead by performing many sinful activities and was condemned by Yamraj to be very severely punished. But because at the time of death he chanted the name of Narayan, although he was calling not for the Supreme Lord Narayan but for his son named Narayan, he was saved from the hands of Yamraj. Therefore, pleasing Narayan does not require as much endeavor as pleasing one's family, community, and nation. We have seen important political leaders killed for a slight discrepancy in their behavior. Therefore, pleasing one's society, family, community, and nation is extremely difficult. Pleasing Narayan, however, is not at all difficult. It is very easy. One's duty is to revive one's relationship with Narayan. A slight endeavor in this direction will make the attempt successful, whereas one will never be successful in pleasing his so called family, society, and nation. Even if one endeavors to sacrifice his life, the simple endeavor involved in the devotional service of Sravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, hearing and chanting the holy name of the Lord, can make one successful in pleasing the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, as has therefore bestowed his blessings by saying, Param Vijayate Shri Krishna Sankirtanam. All grace to Shri Krishna Sankirtan. If one wants to derive the actual benefit from this human form, he must take to the chanting of the holy name of the Lord. Text 2023. The Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Controller, who is infallible and indefatigable, is present in different forms of life, from the inert living beings, sthavara, such as plants, to Brahma, the foremost created living being. He is also present in the varieties of material creations and in the material elements, the total material energy and the modes of material nature, Sattva-guna, Rajoguna, and Tamaguna, as well as the unmanifested material nature and the false ego. Although he is one, he is present everywhere, and he is also the transcendental supersoul, the cause of all causes, who is present as the observer in the course of the hearts of all living entities. He is indicated as that which is pervaded and as the all pervading supersoul, but actually he cannot be indicated. He is changeless and undivided. He is simply perceived as the supreme Satchid Ananda, eternity, knowledge, and bliss. Being covered by the curtain of external energy, to the atheist he appears non existent. Purport. Not only the Supreme Personality of Godhead present as the Supersoul of all living entities, at the same time, he pervades everything in the entire creation. He exists in all circumstances and at all times. He exists in the heart of Lord Brahma and also in the course of the hearts of dogs, hogs, trees, plants, and so on. He is present everywhere. He is present not only in the heart of the living entity, but also in the material things, even in the atoms, protons, electrons, being explored by material scientists. The Lord is present in three features as Brahman, Paramatma, and Bhagavan. Because he is present everywhere, he is described as Sarvam Khalu Idam Sar Brahma. Vishnu exists beyond Brahman. Bhagavad Gita confirms that Krishna, by his Brahman feature, is all pervading. Maya Tatam Idam Sarvam. But Brahman depends upon Krishna. Brahmano hi pratisthaham. Without Krishna, there could be no existence of Brahman or Paramatma. Therefore, Bhagavan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is the ultimate realization of the Absolute Truth. Although he is present as the Paramatma in the core of everyone's heart, he is nonetheless one, either as an individual or as the all pervading Brahman. The Supreme Cause is Krishna, and devotees who have surrendered to the Supreme Personality of Godhead can realize him and his presence within the universe and within the atom. Andantarastha paramano chayantarastham. This realization is possible only for devotees who have fully surrendered unto the lotus feet of the Lord. For others, it is not possible. This is confirmed by the Lord Himself in Bhagavad Gita 7.14. दैवी एषा गुणमयी मम माया दुरत्यया माम एवय prapadyante mayam etam taranti te. The process of surrender in a devotional attitude is accepted by a fortunate living being. After wandering through many varieties of life on many planetary systems, when one comes to the real understanding of the absolute truth by the grace of a devotee, one surrenders to the Supreme Personality of Godhead. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, Bahunam Janvanam Ante Jnanavan Mam Prapadyate. Prahlad Maharaj's class friends, who were born of Daitya families, thought that realizing the Absolute was extremely difficult. Indeed, we have experienced that many people say this very thing. Actually, however, this is not so. The Absolute, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, is most intimately related to all living entities. Therefore, if one understands the Vaishnava philosophy, which explains how he is present everywhere and how he acts everywhere, to worship the Supreme Lord or to realize Him is not at all difficult. Realization of the Lord, however, is possible only in the association of devotees. Therefore, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in his teaching Sri Rupa Goswami said, Chaitanya Charitamrita Madhya Leela 19.151, Brahmanda Brahmite Kona Bhagyavan Jiva Guru Krishna Prasade Pai Bhakti Lata Vija. The living entity in the material condition wanders through many varieties of life and many varieties of circumstances. But if he comes in contact with a pure devotee and is intelligent enough to take instructions from the pure devotee regarding the process of devotional service, he can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the origin of Brahman and Paramatma, without difficulty. In this regard, Srila Madhavacharya says, Antaryami pratyag atma vyaptah kalo hari smritah prakrutya tamasa bhrutatvat harer aishwaryam na jnayate. The Lord is present as Antaryami in everyone's heart and is visible in the individual soul covered by body. Indeed, He is everywhere at every time and every condition. But because He is covered by the curtain of material energy, to an ordinary person, there appears to be no God. Text 24. Therefore, my dear young friends, born of demons, please act in such a way that the Supreme Lord, who is beyond conception of material knowledge, will be satisfied. Give up your demoniac nature and act without enmity or duality. Show mercy to all living entities by enlightening them in devotional service, thus becoming their well wishers. Purport. The Lord says in Bhagavad Gita 18.55, Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tattvataha. One can understand the Supreme Personality as He is only by devotional service. Prahlad Maharaj ultimately instructed his class friends, the sons of the demons, to accept the process of devotional service by preaching the science of Krishna consciousness to everyone. Preaching is the best service to the Lord. The Lord will immediately be extremely the Lord will immediately be extremely satisfied with one who engages in this service of preaching Krishna consciousness. This is confirmed by the Lord Himself in Bhagavad Gita 18.69. Nacha tasman manusheshu kaschin me priyakrittamaha. There is no servant in this world more dear to me than he, nor will there ever be one more dear. If one sincerely tries his best to spread Krishna consciousness by preaching the glories of the Lord and His supremacy, even if he is imperfectly educated, he becomes the dearmost servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. This is bhakti. As one performs this service for humanity without discrimination between friends and enemies, the Lord becomes satisfied and the mission of one's life is fulfilled. Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu therefore advised everyone to become a guru, devotee, and preach Krishna consciousness. Jare dekha tare kaha Krishna upadesh. That is the easiest way to realize the Supreme Personality of Godhead. By such preaching, the preacher becomes satisfied, and those to whom he preaches are also satisfied. This is the process of bringing peace and tranquility to the entire world. Bhaktaram yajna tapasam sarvaloka maheshwaram suhrudam sarvabhutanam gyantva mam shantim richati. One is expected to understand these three formulas of knowledge concerning the Supreme Lord, that He is the Supreme Enjoyer, that He is the proprietor of everything, and that He is the best well-wisher and friend of everyone. A preacher should personally understand these truths and preach them to everyone. Then there will be peace and tranquility all over the world. The word suhrudam, friendliness, is very significant in this verse. People are generally ignorant of Krishna consciousness, and therefore, to become their best well wisher, one should teach them about Krishna consciousness without discrimination. Since the Supreme Lord Vishnu is situated in the core of everyone's heart, everybody is a temple of Vishnu. One should not misuse this understanding as an excuse for such words as Daridra Narayan. If Narayan lives in the house of a Daridra, a poor man, this does not mean that Narayan becomes poor. He lives everywhere in the houses of poor and those of rich. But in all circumstances, he remains Narayan. To think that he becomes either poor or rich is a material calculation. He is always Sad Aishwarya Purna, full in six opulences in all circumstances. Text 25. Nothing is unobtainable for devotees who have satisfied the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the cause of all causes, the original source of everything. The Lord is the reservoir of unlimited spiritual qualities. For devotees, therefore, who are transcendental to the modes of the material nature, what is the use of following the principles of religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation, which are all automatically obtainable under the influence of the modes of nature? We devotees always glorify the lotus feet of the Lord, and therefore we need not ask for anything in terms of dharma, kama, artha, or and moksha. Purport. In an advanced civilization, people are eager to be religious, to be economically well situated, to satisfy their senses to the fullest extent, and at last to attain liberation. However, these are not to be magnified as desirable. Indeed, for a devotee, these are all very easily available. Bilwa Mangal Thakur shared, Muktihi swayam mukulitanjali sevate sman dharmartha kama gataya samaya pratikshaha. Liberation always stands at the door of a devotee, ready to carry out his orders. Material advancement in religion, economic development, sense gratification, and liberation simply wait to serve a devotee at the first opportunity. A devotee is already in a transcendental position. He does not need further qualifications to be liberated, as confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.26. Shagunan samatitaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. A devotee is transcendental to the actions and reactions of the three modes of material nature because he is situated on the Brahman platform. Prahlad Maharaj said, Agunena cha kankshitena. If one is engaged in the transcendental loving service of the lotus feet of the Lord, he does not need anything in terms of dharma, artha, kama, or moksha. In Srimad Bhagavatam, therefore, in the beginning of the transcendental literature, it is said, Dharma projita kaitava, dharma, artha, kama, and moksha are kaitava, false and unnecessary. Nirmat Saranam, persons who are completely transcendental to the material activities of separateness, who make no distinction between mine and yours, but who simply engage in the devotional service of the Lord, are actually fit to accept Bhagavad Dharma, Dharman Bhagavataniha, because they are Nirmatsara, not jealous of anyone. They want to make others devotees, even their enemies. In this regard, Srila Madhvacharya remarks, Kankshate mokshagam api sukham na kangshato yatha Devotees are not desirous of any material happiness, including the happiness derived from liberation. This is called Anya Vilashita Sunyam Jnana Karmadi Anabhritam. Karmis desire material happiness and Jnanis desire liberation. But a devotee does not desire anything. He is simply satisfied by rendering transcendental loving service at the lotus feet of Lord and glorifying Him everywhere by preaching, which is his life and soul. Text 26. Religion, economic development, and sense gratification. These are described in the Vedas as three barga or three ways to salvation. Within these three categories are education and self realization. Ritualistic ceremonies performed according to Vedic injunction, logic, the science of law and order, and the various means of earning one's livelihood. These are the external subject matters of study in the Vedas, and therefore I consider them material. However, I consider surrender to the lotus feet of Lord Vishnu to be transcendental. Purport. These instructions of Prahlad Maharaj stress the transcendental position of devotional service. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita 14.26, Mam cha yo vyabhicharena bhakti yogena sevate sagunan samatitaitan brahma bhuyaya kalpate. One who engages in full devotional service, who does not fall down in any circumstance, at once transcends the modes of material nature and thus comes to the level of Brahman. One who is fully engages in devotional service of the Lord is immediately raised to the transcendental position, which is the Brahma Bhuta stage. Any education or activity not on the Brahma Bhuta platform, the platform of self realization, is considered to be material. And Prahlad Maharaj says that anything material cannot be the absolute truth. But the absolute truth is on the spiritual platform. This is also confirmed by Lord Krishna in Bhagavad Gita 2.45, where he says, Traigunya Vishaya Veda Nistraigunyo Bhavarjuna. The Vedas mainly deal with the subject of three modes of material nature. Rise above these modes, O Arjun, be transcendental to all of them. To act on the material platform, even if one's activities are sanctioned by the Vedas, is not the ultimate goal of life. The ultimate goal of life is to stay on the spiritual platform, fully surrendered to the Parama Purusha, the Supreme Person. This is the object of the human mission. In summary, the Vedic ritualistic ceremonies and injunctions are not to be discounted. They are means of being promoted to the spiritual platform. But if one does not come to the spiritual platform, the Vedic ceremonies are simply a waste of time. This is confirmed in Srimad Bhagavatam 1.2.8. Dharma swanusthita punsam viswakshena kathasuya nopadayed yadiratim shrama eva hi kevalam. Duties dharma executed by men, regardless of occupation, are only so much useless labor if they do not provoke attraction for the message of the Supreme Lord. If one very strictly performs the various duties of religion but does not ultimately come to the platform of surrendering to the Supreme Lord, his methods of attaining salvation or elevation are simply a waste of time and energy. Text 27. Narayan, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the well-wisher and friend of all living entities, formally explained this transcendental message to the great saint Narad. Such knowledge is extremely difficult to understand without the mercy of a saintly person like Narad. But everyone who has taken shelter of Narad's disciplic succession can understand this confidential knowledge. Purport. It is stated here that this confidential knowledge is extremely difficult to understand. Yet it is very easy to understand if one takes shelter of a pure devotee. This confidential knowledge is also mentioned at the end of Bhagavad Gita, where the Lord says, Sarvadharman parityajya mamekam sharanam raja. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. This knowledge is an extremely confidential secret, but it can be understood if one approaches the Supreme Personality of Godhead through the bona fide agent, the spiritual master, in the disciplic succession from Narad. Prahlad Maharaj wanted to impress upon the sons of the demons that although such knowledge can be understood only by a saintly person like Narad, they should not be disappointed. For if one takes shelter of Narad instead of material teachers, this knowledge is possible to understand. Understanding does not depend upon high parentage. The living entity is certainly pure on the spiritual platform, and therefore anyone who attains the spiritual platform by the grace of the spiritual master can also understand this confidential knowledge. Text 28. Prahlad Maharaj continued, I received this knowledge from the great saint Narad Muni, who is always engaged in devotional service. This knowledge, which is called Bhagavad Dharma, is fully scientific. It is based on logic and philosophy and is free from all material contamination. Text 29:30. The sons of demons replied, Dear Prahlad, neither you nor we know any teacher or spiritual master other than Shanda and Amarka, the sons of Sukracharya. After all, we are children and they are our controllers. For you, especially, who always remain within the palace, it is very difficult to associate with a great personality. Dear friend, most gentle one, would you kindly explain how it was possible for you to hear Narad? Kindly dispel our doubts in this regard. Purport. Thus, there is no purport here?
No, there's no purport.
Okay. Thus end the Bhaktivedanta purports of the 7th canto, 6th chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Prahlad Instructs His Demoniac Schoolmates. Chapter 7. What Prahlad learned from in the womb. Text 1. Narad Muni said, although Prahlad Maharaj was born in a family of asuras, he was the greatest of all devotees. Having thus been questioned by his class friends, the sons of asuras, he remembered the words spoken to him by me and replied to his friends as follows. Purport. When he was in the womb of his mother, Prahlad Maharaj listened to the words of Narad Muni. One cannot imagine how the baby in embryo could hear Narad, but this is spiritual life. Progress in spiritual life cannot be obstructed by any material condition. This is called ahituki apratihata. Reception of spiritual knowledge is never checked by any material condition. Thus, Prahlad Maharaj, from his very childhood, spoke spiritual knowledge to his class friends, and certainly it was effective, although all of them were children. Text 2. Prahlad Maharaj said, when our father Hiranyakashipu went to Mandarachala mountain to execute severe austerities, in his absence the demigods, headed by King Indra, made a severe attempt to subdue all the demons in warfare. Okay. Text 3. Alas, as a serpent is eaten by small ants, so the troublesome Hiranyakashipu, who always inflicted miseries upon all types of people, has now been defeated by the reactions of his own sinful activities. Saying this, the demigods, headed by King Indra, arranged to fight the demons. Text 4 and 5. When the great leaders of the demons were being killed, one after another, saw the unprecedented exertion of the demigods in fighting, they began to flee, scattering themselves in all directions. Simply to protect their lives, they hastily fled from their homes, wives, children, animals, and household paraphernalia. Paying no heed to all this, the demons simply fled. Text 6. The victorious demigods plundered the palace of Hiranyakashipu, the king of the demons, and destroyed everything within it. Then Indra, king of heaven, arrested my mother, the queen. As she was being led away, crying in fear like a kurari captured by a vulture, the great sage Narad, who at that time had no engagement, appeared on the scene and saw her in that condition. Text 8. Narad Muni said, O Indra, king of the demigods, this woman is certainly sinless. You should not drag her off in this merciless way. O greatly fortunate one, this chaste woman is the wife of another. You must immediately release her. Text 9. King Indra said, in the womb of this woman, the wife of the demon Hiranyakashipu, is the seed of that great demon. Therefore, let her remain in our custody until her child is delivered, and then we shall release her. Purport. Indra, the king of heaven, decided to arrest Prahlad Maharaj's mother because he thought that another demon, another Hiranyakashipu, was within her womb. The best course, he thought, was to kill the child when the child was born, and then the woman could be released. Text 10. Narad Muni replied, the child within this woman's womb is faultless and sinless. Indeed, He is a great devotee, a powerful servant of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Therefore, you will not be able to kill him. Purport. There have been many instances in which demons or non-devotees have attempted to kill a devotee, but they have never been able to destroy a great devotee of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The Lord promises in Bhagavad Gita 9.31, Kaunteya pratijanihi name bhaktaha pranashyati. This is a declaration by the Supreme Personality of Godhead that his devotee cannot be killed by demons. Prahlad Maharaj is the vivid example of the truth of this promise. Narad Muni told the king of heaven, it would be impossible for you to kill the child even though you are demigods, and certainly it would be impossible for others. Text 11. When the great saint Narad Muni had thus spoken, King Indra, being respectful to Narada's words, immediately released my mother. Because of my being a devotee of the Lord, all the demigods circumambulated her. Then they returned to their celestial kingdom. Purport. Although King Indra and the other demigods are exalted personalities, they were so obedient to Narad Muni that King Indra immediately accepted Narad Muni's words concerning Prahlad Maharaj. This is called understanding by the Parampara system. Indra and the demigods did not know that a great devotee was in the womb of Kayadhu, the wife of Hiranyakashipu. But they accepted the authoritative statements of Narad Muni and immediately offered their respects to the devotee by circumambulating the woman in whose womb he was living. To understand God and the devotee by the Parampara system is the process of knowledge. There is no need to speculate about God and his devotee. One should accept the statements of a bona fide devotee and thus try to understand. Text 12. Prahlad Maharaj continued, the great saint Narad Muni brought my mother to his ashram and assured her of all protection, saying, my dear child, please remain at my ashram until the arrival of your husband. Text 13. After accepting the instructions of Devarshi Narad, my mother stayed in his care without fear from any direction, as long as my father, the king of the Daityas, had not become free from his severe austerities. Text 14. My mother, being pregnant, desired the safety of her embryo and desired to give birth after her husband's arrival. Thus she stayed at Narad Muni's ashram, where she rendered service unto Narad Muni with great devotion. Purport. It is stated in Srimad Bhagavatam 9.19.17, Matra Shwasra Duhitra Va Navi Vikta Shano Bhavet Balavan Indriya Grama Vidvansam Apika Shati. One should not remain in a secluded place with a woman, even one's mother, sister, or daughter. Nonetheless, although one is strictly prohibited from staying with a woman in a secluded place, Narad Muni gave shelter to Prahlad Maharaj's young mother, who rendered service to him with great devotion and faith. Does this mean that Narad Muni transgressed the Vedic injunctions? Certainly he did not. Such injunctions are intended for mundane creatures, but Narad Muni is transcendental to mundane categories. Narad Muni is a great saint and is transcendentally situated. Therefore, although he was a young man, he could give shelter to a young woman and accept her service. Haridas Thakur also spoke with a young woman, a prostitute, in the dead of night, but the woman could not deviate his mind. Instead, she became a Vaishnavi, a pure devotee, by the benediction of Haridas Thakur. Ordinary persons, however, should not imitate such highly elevated devotees. Ordinary persons must strictly observe the rules and regulations by staying aloof from the association of women. No one should imitate Narad Muni or Haridas Thakur. It is said, Vaishnavara Kriya Mudra Bigyena Bujhai. Even if a man is very advanced in learning, he cannot understand the behavior of a Vaishnava. Anyone can take shelter of a pure Vaishnava without fear. Therefore, in the previous verse, it is been distinctly said, Devarser Antike Shakuta Bhaya. Kayadhu, the mother of Prahlad Maharaj, stayed under the protection of Narad Muni without fear from any direction. Similarly, Narad Muni, in his transcendental position, stayed with the young woman without fear of deviation. Narad Muni, Haridas Thakur, and similar acharyas, especially empowered to broadcast the glories of Lord, cannot be brought down to the material platform. Therefore, one is strictly forbidden to think that the Acharya is an ordinary human being. Gurushu Naramatihi. Text 15. Narad Muni delivered his instructions both to me, who was within the womb, and to my mother, who was engaged in rendering him service. Because he is naturally extremely kind to the fallen souls, being in a transcendental position, he gave instructions on religion and transcendental knowledge. These instructions were free from all material contamination. Here it is said, Dharmasya Tattvam Jnanam Cha Nirmalam. The word Nirmalam refers to spotless dharma, spotless religion, or in other words, Bhagavad Dharma. Ordinary ritualistic activities constitute contaminated religion, by which one benefits by developing material wealth and prosperity. But uncontaminated, pure religion consists of understanding one's relationship with God and acting accordingly, thus fulfilling the highest mission of life and returning home back to Godhead. Prahlad Maharaj advised that one elevate oneself to the standard of Bhagavad Dharma from the very beginning of life. Kaumara acharit pragyo dharman bhagavatan here. The Lord Himself also speaks of pure, uncontaminated religion when He says, Sarva dharman parityajya mam ekam sharanam raja. Abandon all varieties of religion and just surrender unto me. Bhagavad Gita 18:66. One must understand one's relationship with God and then act accordingly. This is Bhagavad Dharma. Bhagavad Dharma means Bhakti Yoga. वासुदेवे भगवती भक्ति योग प्रयोजितः जनयति आशु वैराग्यम ज्ञानम च यद अहेतुकम. By rendering devotional service unto the personality of Godhead, Sri Krishna, one immediately acquires causeless knowledge and detachment from the world. Bhagavatam 1.2.7. To be situated on the platform of pure religion, one should perform Bhakti Yoga in relationship with Krishna, Vasudev. Text 16. Because of the long duration of time that has passed, and because of her being a woman and therefore less intelligent, my mother has forgotten all those instructions. But the great says Narad blessed me, and therefore I could not forget them. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 9.32, the Lord says, Mam hi partha vyapashritya ye pishu papayonayah striyo vaishyas tatha shudras tepi yanti param gatim. O son of Pritha, those who take shelter in me, though they be low-born women, vaishyas, merchants, or shudras, workers, can approach the supreme destination. The word Papa Yoni refers to those who are less than shudras, but even though a woman may not be Papa Yoni, because of being less intelligent, she sometimes forgets devotional instructions. For those who are strong enough, however, there is no question of forgetting. Women are generally attached to material enjoyment, and because of this tendency, they sometimes forget devotional instructions. But if even a woman practices devotional service strictly according to the rules and regulations, the statement by the Lord Himself that she can return to Godhead, Tepi Anti Param Gatim, is not at all astonishing. One must take shelter of the Lord and rigidly follow the rules and regulations. Then, regardless of what one is, one will return home back to Godhead. Prahlad Maharaj's mother was more concerned with protecting the child in the womb and was very anxious to see her husband return. Therefore, she could not consider very seriously the sublime instructions of Narad Muni. Text 17. Prahlad Maharaj continued, My dear friends, if you can place your faith in my words, simply by that faith you can also understand transcendental knowledge. Just like me, although you are small children. Similarly, a woman can also understand transcendental knowledge and know what is spirit and what is matter. Purport. These words of Prahlad Maharaj are very important in regard to knowledge descending by disciplic succession. Even when Prahlad Maharaj was a baby, within the womb of his mother, he became fully convinced of the existence of the supreme power because of hearing the powerful instructions of Narad and understood how to attain perfection in life of Bhakti Yoga. These are the most important understandings in spiritual knowledge. Yasya deve parabhaktir yatha deve tatha gurau tasaite kathita yartha prakashante mahatmanaha. Unto those great souls who have implicit faith in both the Lord and the spiritual master, all the imports of Vedic knowledge are automatically revealed. Shvetashvatara Upanishad 6.23. अतः श्रीकृष्ण नामादि न भवेद ग्राह्यम इंद्रिय सेवन मुखे ही जिह्वादौ स्वयं एव स्फुरति अधः. No one can understand Krishna as he is by the blunt material senses, but he reveals himself to the devotees. being pleased with them for their transcendental loving service unto him. Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.234. Bhaktya mam abhijanati yavan yaschasmi tattvataha tato mam tattvato gyantva bishate tad anantaram. One can understand the Supreme Personality as he is only by devotional service. And when one is in full consciousness of the Supreme Lord, by such devotion he can enter into the kingdom of God. Bhagavad Gita 1855. These are Vedic instructions. One must have full faith in the words of the spiritual master and similar faith in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Then the real knowledge of Atma and Paramatma and the distinction between matter and spirit will be automatically revealed. This Atma Tattva or spiritual knowledge will be revealed within the core of a devotee's heart because of his having taken shelter of the lotus feet of a Mahajan such as Prahlad Maharaj. In this verse, the word Bhuyat may be understood to mean let there be. Prahlad Maharaj offers his blessings to his class friends, saying, also become faithful like me, become bona fide Vaishnavas. A devotee of the Lord desires for everyone to take to Krishna consciousness. Unfortunately, however, people sometimes do not have staunch faith in the words of the spiritual master, who comes by the disciplic succession, and therefore they are unable to understand transcendental knowledge. The spiritual master must be in the line of authorized disciplic succession, like Prahlad Maharaj, who received the knowledge from Narad. If the class friends of Prahlad Maharaj, the sons of demons, were to accept the truth through Prahlad, they would certainly also become fully aware of transcendental knowledge. The words Vaisharadi Dhihi refer to the intelligence concerning the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is extremely expert. The Lord has created wonderful universes by his expert knowledge. Unless one is extremely expert, he cannot understand the expert management of the Supreme Expert. One can understand, however, if one is fortunate enough to meet a bona fide spiritual master coming in the disciplic succession from Lord Brahma, Lord Shiva, Mother Lakshmi, or the Kumaras. These four sampradayas or the disciplic successions of knowledge and transcendence are called Brahma Sampradaya, Rudra Sampradaya, Sri Sampradaya, and Kumar Sampradaya. Sampradaya Vihina Ye Mantras Te Nishphala Mataha. The knowledge of the Supreme received from such a Sampradaya or disciplic succession can give one enlightenment. If one does not take to the path of disciplic succession, it is not possible for one to understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead. If one understands the Supreme Lord through devotional service with faith in the disciplic succession and then advances further, he awakens his natural love for God. And then his success in life is assured. Text 18. Just as the fruits and flowers of a tree in due course of time undergo 6 changes: birth, existence, growth, transformation, dwindling, and then death. The material body, which is obtained by the spirit soul under different circumstances, undergoes similar changes. However, there are no such changes for the spirit soul. Purport. This is very important verse in the understanding the difference between the spiritual soul and the material body. The soul is eternal, as stated in Bhagavad Gita 2.20. Na jayate mriyate va kadachin nayam bhutva bhavita va na bhuyah ajo nitya sasvatayam purana na hanyate hanyamane sharire. For the soul there is never birth nor death, nor having once been does he ever cease to be. He is unborn, eternal, ever existing, undying, and primeval. He is not slain when the body is slain. The spirit soul is eternal, being freed from waste and change, which take place because of the material body. The example of a tree and its fruits and flowers is very simple and clear. A tree stands for many, many years, but with the seasonal changes, its fruits and flowers undergo 6 transformations. The foolish theory of modern chemists that life can be produced by chemical interactions cannot be accepted as truth. The birth of a human being's material body takes place due to a mixture of the ovum and semen. But the history of birth is that although the ovum and semen mix together after sex, there is not always pregnancy. Unless the soul enters the mixture, there is no possibility of pregnancy. But when the soul takes shelter of the mixture, the body takes birth, exists, grows, transforms, and dwindles, and ultimately it is vanquished. The fruits and flowers of a tree seasonally come and go, but the tree continues to stand. Similarly, The transmigrating soul accepts various bodies which undergo 6 transformations, but the soul remains permanently the same. Ajo nitya sasota yam purano na hanyate hanyamane sarire. The soul is eternal and ever existing, but the bodies accepted by the soul are changing. There are 2 kinds of soul: the supreme soul, the personality of Godhead, and the individual soul, the living entity. As various bodily changes take place in the individual soul, different millenniums of creation take place in the supreme soul. In this regard, Madhvacharya says, Sad vikaraha sarirasya na vishnostad gatasya cha tad adhinam shariram cha gyatva tan mamatam tyajet. Since the body is the external feature of the soul is not dependent on the body. Rather, the body is dependent on the soul. One who understands this truth should not be very much anxious about the maintenance of his body. Therefore, there is no possibility of maintaining the body permanently or eternally. Antavanta ime deha nitya swakta saririna. This is the statement of Bhagavad Gita 2.18. The material body is antavat, perishable, but the soul within the body is eternal, nitya sukta saririna. Lord Vishnu and the individual souls who are part and parcel of him are both eternal. Nityo nityanam chetanas chetananam. Lord Vishnu is the chief living being, whereas the individual living entities are parts of Lord Vishnu. All the various grades of bodies, from the gigantic universal body to the small body of an ant, are perishable. But the supersoul and the soul, being equal in quality, both exist eternally. This is further explained in the next verses. Text 1920. Atma refers to the Supreme Lord or the living entities. Both of them are spiritual, free from birth and death, free from deterioration, and free from material contamination. They are individual, they are the knowers of the external body, and they are the foundation or shelter of everything. They are free from material chains. They are self illuminated, they are the cause of all causes, and they are all pervading. They have nothing to do with the material body, and therefore they are always uncovered. With these transcendental qualities, one who is actually learned must give up the illusory conception of life in which one thinks I am this material body, and everything in relationship with this body is mine. Purport. In Bhagavad Gita 15.7, Lord Krishna clearly says, Mame vansa jiva loke jiva bhutaha. All the living beings are parts of me. Therefore, the living entities are qualitatively the same as the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is the leader, the supreme among all the living entities. In the Vedas, it is said, Nitya Nityanam Chetanas Chetananam. The Lord is the chief individual living entity, the leader of the subordinate living entities. Because the living entities are parts or samples of God, their qualities are not different from those of the Supreme Lord. The living entities have the same qualities as the Lord. Just as a drop of sea water is composed of the same chemicals as the great sea itself. Thus, there is oneness in quality, but a difference in quantity. One can understand the Supreme Personality of Godhead by understanding the sample, the living entity, because all the qualities of God exist in a minute quantity in the living entities. There is oneness, but God is great, whereas the living entities are extremely small. Anor Aniyam Mahato Mahiyan, Katha Upanishad 1.2.20. The living entities are smaller than the atom, but God is greater than the greatest. Our conception of greatness may be represented by the sky because we think of the sky as being unlimitedly big, but God is bigger than the sky. Similarly, we acknowledge that the living entities are smaller than atoms, being 1/10,000 the size of the tip of a hair. Yet the quality of being the supreme cause of all causes exists in the living entity as well as in the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Indeed, it is due to the presence of the living entity that the body exists and bodily changes take place. Similarly, it is because the Supreme Lord is within this universe that the changes dictated by the material laws occur. The word ekaha, meaning individual, is significant. As explained in Bhagavad Gita 9.4, Matsthani sarva bhutani na chaham teshu avasthitaha. Everything material and spiritual, including earth, water, air, fire, sky, and the living entities, exists on the platform of spirit soul. Although everything is an emanation from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, one should not think that the Supreme Lord is dependent upon anything else. Both God and the living entities are fully conscious. As living entities, we are conscious of our bodily existence. Similarly, the Lord is conscious of the gigantic cosmic manifestation. This is confirmed in the Vedas. Yasmin Diyahu Prithvi Chantariksham Vigyataram Adhikena Bijaniyat Ekam Eva Dvitiyam Atma Jyotihi Samrad Iho Vacha Sa Iman Lokan Ashrujata Satyam Jnanam Anantam Asangohi Ayam Purushaha Purnasya Purnam Adayam Purnam Eva Vashishyate. All these Vedic injunctions prove that both the Supreme Personality of Godhead and the minute soul are individual. One is great and the other is small. But both of them are the cause of all causes, the corporally limited and the universally unlimited. We should always remember that although we are equal to the Supreme Personality of Godhead in quality, we are never equal to Him in quantity. Persons with a small fund of knowledge, finding themselves equal in quality with God, foolishly think that they are equal in quantity also. Their intelligence is called Avishuddha Buddhaya, unpolished or contaminated intelligence. When such persons, after endeavoring hard for many, many lives to understand the supreme cause, are finally in actual knowledge of Krishna, Vasudeva, they surrender unto him. Vasudeva sarvam iti samahatma sudullavaha. Thus, they become great Mahatmas, perfect souls. If one is fortunate enough to understand his relationship with God, knowing that God is great, Vibhu, whereas the living entity is small, Anu, he is perfect in knowledge. The individual exists in darkness when he thinks that his material body and that everything in relationship with the material body belongs to him. This is called aham mama janasya moha yam aham mameti. This is illusion. One must give up his illusory conception and thus become fully aware of everything. Hare Krishna. Should I stop sharing now?
Yes, Mataji.
Thank you so
It's
much.
7:21, right, Mataji?
Yes, we have to start from 7:21 tomorrow.
Thank you very much for reading, Mataji.
Thank you very much.
It's a long time, 90 minutes of non-stop nectar you gave us. It
Yes,
shows that you are well versed in reading to others in many other groups. So thank you very much for your
so much, Matt.
wonderful reading.
I've learned the reading from you anyway. From
Oh, no.
remember our lunchtime calls?
Yes,
Reading
yes.
That's how
Hare
it was
Krishna.
started.
Hare
Yeah.
Krishna. Thank you so much, Mataji, for reading.